All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking at something pretty fascinating and maybe a little uncomfortable from inside the scuba diving industry. The Business of Diving Institute did this big survey asking instructors about the quality and safety of dive training. And the results? Well, they're definitely worth talking about. This whole thing really boils down to one central question. It's a question that gets right to the heart of what it means to be a professional teaching people how to safely explore our incredible underwater world. So, are scuba instructors cutting corners? I mean, that's a pretty blunt question, right? But the survey didn't shy away from it. They put it directly to the professionals themselves. So, what did they say? Okay, so the answer they got might be a bit of a shocker, but it's really important to remember. This survey wasn't about pointing fingers. It was designed to be an honest look in the mirror for the industry. And you've got to understand how they did this because it's key. This wasn't some outside group coming in to judge. Over 400 instructors took part in a self-assessment, an exercise in being honest about their own practices. And that context is absolutely crucial for what's coming next. So here it is, 26.4%. Yep, that's right. More than 1 in 4 instructors admitted to having cut corners in their teaching. That is a pretty significant number, especially because it's coming directly from inside the community itself. Now, this is where it gets really interesting when you break it down. It seems to be a bigger issue for recreational instructors. About 31% of them admitted to it. Compare that to tech diving instructors, where it's lower at 19.2%, which, kind of makes sense when you think about it. Cutting corners in tech diving, the stakes are just so much higher, and the consequences can be immediate and severe. Okay, so if a quarter of instructors are admitting this, the next big question has to be, why? What's actually going on here? Well, the survey dug into that too, and the answers point less at individual instructors and more towards some really powerful systemic pressures. And wow, this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? When instructors were asked what the biggest roadblocks to quality training were, two things just jumped off the page. Time, a whopping 60% said there's just not enough of it, and profitability, or, money, right behind it at 40%. These are the twin pressures that are really shaping the training environment. And listen to this quote from an instructor. It really brings that profitability bar to life. The pressure to compete on price, that race to the bottom, forces them to squeeze something. And in this case, it's essential resources like pool time. It's a perfect example of market forces directly impacting safety standards. And it's not always the instructor making the call either. This comment really highlights that pressure from above, from the dive operations, from management, the people who are prioritizing the bottom line. It shows this real conflict between business goals and the integrity of the training. This quote, this one just cuts right to the chase. It's so simple and so powerful. When the clock is always ticking, something's got to give. And sometimes that's the thoroughness of the training itself. And it's not just about the clock and the wallet. There are other things adding to this pressure cooker environment. Things like how serious the students are, the availability and quality of rental gear, just getting access to a pool, even conflicts with shop management. It all adds up to a really challenging environment to teach in. So this is where it gets really, really interesting. We have this situation where corners are being cut because of all these external pressures. But, and this is a big but, that leads to a fascinating contradiction when you look at how instructors see themselves and their own abilities. And here it is. Here's the paradox. When they were asked to rate their own skills, their own knowledge and attitude, look at these numbers. The response was just overwhelmingly positive. Pretty much everyone felt they were ready, or even thoroughly ready to provide a quality course. And check this out, 0%. Not a single person felt they were not ready. This quote right here, this really gets to the heart of the whole issue. This isn't about bad apples or bad instructors. The instructors see themselves as highly capable professionals who are being forced to make compromises by a system that often prioritizes speed and low cost over everything else. The problem isn't the person, it's the environment they're working in. So, if the system is the problem, what's the solution? Well, the good news is the survey also asked instructors how they push back against these pressures and work to maintain those high standards. And what's really encouraging is that instructors aren't just sitting back and letting this happen. They're actively working to prevent what's known in the industry as drifting away from standards. And their strategies really fall into a few key categories. Keeping up with the official standards,
actively getting feedback from their peers, and teaching with other instructors.
And when you dig into the specific numbers here, a really clear theme pops out. Sure, over 75% review the standards on their own, and that's great. But the most powerful tools seem to be social. Nearly 63% are actively seeking feedback from their colleagues, and over 42% co-teach. The data is pretty clear. Community and collaboration are seen as the best way to fight back against these systemic pressures. And we're not just talking about reading a manual here. Instructors are taking real proactive steps. Some mention that they're actually increasing their prices, specifically so they can afford to give their students more pool time. Others talked about actively pushing back on management when they're asked to cut corners. It's all about them taking back control wherever they can. So this is where we land. The data suggests we have competent, committed instructors working inside a pretty flawed system. And to cope, they're already turning to each other for support and quality control. Which leaves us with this final thought. In an industry facing these kinds of pressures, is strengthening that peer-to-peer network the single most important thing we can do to uphold our standards and ensure the future of scuba instruction is safe and strong?